One of the most asked questions I still get is what gear I'm using to get my photographs. So in this video it is all about the gear I use when I'm out taking photos. I of course also make videos for YouTube, as you can obviously see, but that gear I use there will be for another video. This one is just focused on photography. So let's start out with the lenses I use, and I have quite an arsenal by now. So I use the Sony system, and I specifically for my wide angle choice use this one here. It's the 12 to 24 millimeter, and it's an excellent lens. It is a little soft in the corners, so you will have to stop down. It's an f4 lens, but if you stop down to like 5, 6 or 8, which you probably would anyway, it's fine. It's not like the sharpest lens on the market, and generally ultra wide angle zooms are not. So consider how light it is and how small it is. It's a really great lens. So where do I benefit from this lens? Generally, I only use this one in the Faroe Islands and Iceland, and wherever I have like a big mountain in the background and some kind of stream or other kind of foreground, which I really want to emphasize and make a very strong wide angle shot. For the most part you can get away with a 16 to 35 millimeter, but because it's specifically Iceland I'm shooting in, there are just some of the top locations where you do benefit from having a lens that is a little bit wider than 16 millimeter, such as Kirkjufell or Stocksnes, and even the ice beach works really well, where you can get really close to those big chunks of ice and really emphasize the depth and make them look a little bit more dramatic. The downside to this lens, besides the fairly short focal range, is of course the filter system, where I have to use, as I said last year, this behemoth of a filter system. And I use the one from KASE. It's a really good filter system. You just attach it like this and then put the filter into it. The filters themselves are also really big. As you can see here, this is my 10-stop filter, and it's made out of hardened glass, which is really cool because, as you can see here, I have actually dropped this lens face first down onto some rocks, and it only got like a little splinter here. It didn't break completely. So yeah, they do hold up, and that's very important. Else it's like 180 euro out the window there. So yeah, great system for these wide angle lenses, but it is a pain in the ass to walk around with. And when you have 3 filters and the system, it takes up a lot of space in your backpack, and it does become fairly heavy. So it's always like, should you go for a 16 to 35 or should you go to the 12-24? So far I'm fine with the 12-24 and the big system, but it's really up to you to choose whichever suits you the best. So another of my lenses is of course my telephoto lens, or short telephoto 70 to 200. Fantastic lens, what's to say. Optical image stabilization, I couldn't live without that, that's for sure, because I take a lot of photos in very windy conditions, and here it really helps. Even though it's on a tripod, you can actually benefit from the image stabilization. The rule of thumb is to not use the image stabilization, but if it is very windy, you can benefit from it. Of course, this lens is also really good to make that super dramatic perspective where you like compress the scene. Just remember that to compress the scene you have to walk away and then use the lens to crop your field of view. If you want to know more about that, be sure to check out my 70 to 200 millimeter video. Here I share a lot of information about using this specific lens. So the next lens I want to talk about is actually the one I'm recording with right now. I've also made a dedicated video for that one, and that's the 24 to 105 f4 lens. Since I'm using the Sony system, obviously this is a super good lens for the Sony cameras. It's super sharp, it's sharp all the way out to the edges. It's probably the sharpest 24 to 105mm lens on the market right now. So the main benefit of this lens is, of course, the broad amount of focal lengths you get, all the way from wide angle 24mm all the way to a short tele at the 105mm. So it's the perfect all-round lens. And some photographers say that they don't need an all-round lens. They can cover what they need with a 16 to 35 and a 70 to 200. But I really like this lens, and I benefit a lot from it, especially in 2019, where I've been taking a lot more forest photography and woodland photography, where it's actually my go-to lens. With this lens I can shoot at the widest or zoom a little bit in, and then I can cut out the top of the trees and don't get much of the sky in there. I talk about that in my 5 tips to woodland photography. What's also a great benefit from especially this lens is that it's really good for some macro photography. No, it's not a dedicated macro lens, but because it has a very short minimum focus distance, which is only about 25-30 centimeters, you can get really close to your subject and you can zoom all the way into 105mm, and that is way more preferable than using the 70 to 200mm zoom all the way into 200mm, because it only has a minimum focus distance of 1.5 meters. So this lens is not just an all-round lens when it comes to the regular focal lengths, it's also really good for some macro and detail photography. So the last benefit of using a 24 to 105mm lens, contrary to a 24 to 70mm lens, is that it closes the gap from 70 to 100mm. And speaking of that, oh, look at this, my new baby. So this is the 100 to 400mm lens from Sony. I literally just got it yesterday, so I have not really used it. I will make a future video on this one, most likely. I have tested it out of my window, and wowza, this bad boy can zoom. And when I get my 2x extender, I can finally verify that we have been to the moon. When it comes to filters for my 70 to 200, my 24 to 105, and my 100 to 400, I have been using just regular screw-on filters, which I have in this little pouch here, and the smaller the better. I have just got some new filters. These are just some regular screw-on filters, but they are variable neutral density filters, which I think will come in handy. I haven't used them yet, so I do not know if there are any color cast in them or how the quality of the filters are. I might get back to that and make a dedicated filter video about that, because I have tried so many systems by now and screw-on filters, and hopefully I can also try out some magnetic filters, and I can get back to you on how good they are. These filters here from K&F Concept, they are supposed to be without that cross-vignetting, which is one of the main problems of using variable neutral density filters. But if they are without, then I really think that these filters can make quite a significant difference. I have 2 types. I think one is like ND4 to ND8, and the other one is ND8 to ND8 stop or something like that. I'm not sure. Maybe it's actually a 10 stop. Could be a 10 stop. I should really have checked that out before making this video. Anyway, these are 77mm filters, so I can use them directly on my 24 to 105 and my 100 to 400. For the 70 to 200, I just have a step-up ring, 72mm to 77mm, and that should cover everything. Then I of course also have a polarizing filter, which is also K&F Concept. They just sent me all of these filters, so thank you for that. And I'm looking forward to trying all these new filters out. I also have some new filters from Haida, which I've tried out, but that's a dedicated system, which, well, I'm not the biggest fan of filter systems, at least from my experience. I have more than enough in this big guy here. So all the lenses that I have talked about so far has a minimum aperture of f4. So for night photography, I use 2 dedicated lenses for that. One lens is this one, the 15mm f2 from Laowa, specifically made for the Sony system, full frame system. And I like it. I haven't used it as much as I thought I would. Problem is at 15mm, the Milky Way actually becomes fairly small. And when I shoot the northern lights, you have to open it all the way up, and it does become a little bit soft at f2. So I used it for my Stuxness photo, which you can see here, and it is a little bit soft. So it's not the one I use the most. The one I use the most, whoopsie, is still my Sigma 20mm 1.4. This is a workhorse. I love the 20mm for night photography. The Milky Way is plenty big in the frame, and since it goes all the way down to f1.4, it is super fast, which is extremely important when it comes to photographing the auroras. Like, you almost can't have a lens or an aperture that is fast enough to shoot the auroras. This is still my Canon version, and I'm using the Sigma MC11 adapter on it. And honestly, I have no clue if that's better than just getting the dedicated Sigma Sony lens, but it works fine. Obviously, when you shoot it wide open, when it comes to astrophotography, you will see some coma and some elongated stars all the way out in the edges. And I know some astrophotographers really don't like that. Personally, I don't care too much about it. You will have to stop this one down too if you want sharper stars, that's for sure. But it's still a very sharp lens at f1.4 in the center of the frame. So those were all the lenses I use, and obviously I don't bring all the lenses out in the field at once. I do have to prioritize what it is I'm photographing. I'm not bringing the ASTRO lenses out when I'm doing woodland photography. And when I do astrophotography or night photography, I try to leave my other lenses back home, because there's no point in using them when I have these dedicated lenses to each subject. Then, of course, I also have my drone. It is new compared to last year's gear video. This is the DJI Mavic 2 Pro. 20 megapixels as far as I remember. Everybody is fussing about it's a Hasselblad camera or Hasselblad lens. Who cares? Generally, the lens isn't the sharpest unless you hit an aperture between 4 and 5.6, maybe 6.3. But the aperture 5 and 5.6 are definitely the sharpest on this device. If you stop down to f8, f10 and f11, your material basically becomes useless. So I don't know why they have introduced that aperture, but you know, marketing. So the main reason why I actually updated to the DJI Mavic 2 Pro was because they also released the smart controller. Now, I have had a lot of connection problems if you've seen my earlier videos, where I connected the phone to the other remotes on my DJI Mavic Platinum. I'm pretty sure it has mostly something to do with my phone, since I haven't tried other phones. But when they released this one here, I was just like instantly, yes, thank you. A dedicated controller with a good screen which you can see in sunlight, good controls, and I am not afraid that it will lose connection. I have yet to lose connection with this controller, unless it's my own fault because I have been flying the drone behind some rocks or something like that. But as long as it's in visual range, this controller, I can usually fly to about 2.5 to 3 kilometers away out over the water, and still have connection. So yeah, really great with this controller here. So in regard to ball heads, I have 2 ball heads I'm using right now. One is this super professional Arca Swiss ball head designed by the company Arca Swiss, and this is the P0, and it comes with a lot of different extensions. What is interesting about this one is that when you've placed it on your tripod, then you can release it, and it is actually the upper part of the ball head that moves. And it comes with that benefit that if you are into panoramas, you can lock it down, and you don't need to level your tripod, and you can just open it up and you can move the top part here around. Now I have a version with a 2-part locking system. So when you attach your camera and you lock it down, you just have to swipe this little notch here to the side, and then you have to get all the way in here behind this and touch that one too, and then you can open it up and release the camera. The camera stays where it is, but it is a little bit unhandy when you have big winter gloves on to unlock the second part here. It takes a little bit more mingling around. The good thing about this ball head is that when I use it on my travel tripod, I will talk about in a minute, this actually becomes a way more sturdy setup using this one ball head here. And you can probably see that I'm using this ball head in my Iceland videos that I am releasing now and in the future adventure videos of mine. So the other ball head I'm using is the one that came with the tripod from Benro, and I love this little ball head. Given it is a little bit less sturdy than the Arca Swiss ball head, so I generally only use this one here back home in Denmark or in places where I know there won't be a lot of wind. But when you have locked it down, the camera is really not going anywhere. It's just the entire setup, which is, I wouldn't call it flimsy because that's not fair to the setup, but the Arca Swiss is definitely making it a little bit more sturdy. But you know, you should get something for your 400 euro when it comes to the ball heads. However, what I really love about this ball head here is how intuitive it is to release the camera. Way faster than the Arca Swiss. So when you just hold the camera in your right hand, you simply just use your left hand, pull the knob back, and then twist it to the left, and your camera is free. Some might think, oh, that's too easy to let go of, but the thing is that it is locked as long as you don't pull it back. And I have never had any issues with this. This is so intuitive and so easy to use. I was a little bit skeptical when I got the ball head. I saw that the upper part here, the plate here, was a little bit slim. But in all honesty, I haven't really had any problems with it. And again, in all honesty, this is by far my preferred ball head and probably the best ball head that I've ever owned. And it came with a tripod, so it's a great value. So when it comes to tripods, this Benro tripod here is by a landslide the best tripod I have ever had. Remember last year when I complained about my Sirui and other tripods that these rubber knobs here, they came loose when they got wet? That is not an issue with this tripod. These are also bigger, so they are very easy to grip and twist. So getting the legs out is very easy, unless you fill it with sand, salt and dust, which I of course do whenever I shoot in Iceland. So I do recommend that you do clean your tripod when you get back home. It's super easy to clean it. You just release the legs here, release everything, make sure to take care that these white knobs here are not flushed out somewhere. You take it apart. And just take it apart, clean it, and put it back together again. No headaches there. The locking system, very easy to use. You just pull this one out here. There's no strings, feathers, I don't know. Those small things that pulls the knobs back in. So yeah, you just release it, and then you can pull the leg all the way up like this, and let it go, and then you can actually contract the tripod even more if you so desire. A lot of people don't like to have the middle column because then you can't get all the way down to the ground. It does come with a shorter middle column, so you can just change it as much as you like. That is also super easy. The legs up here still do come loose, but I have only had to tighten it once this year. When I tightened it properly back in summer, I think, which were probably 3 months after I got it. I haven't had an issue with it since, and there's a lot of traction on the legs, so it's really, really nice. The only negative thing I actually have to say about this tripod is that these rubber knobs here, sadly, because I've had it in salt water, I guess, and it's full of salt and sand and dust, I can't get them loose anymore. So I can't change them to the spikes. That being said, I never used the spikes, never had the use for them. Even though I'm in a forest and the ground isn't good, I usually just use a 2 or 5 second timer on the camera, and it's completely still anyway. So I've never really had the use for them, but it does come with spikes if that's of interest to you. So generally the only downside that actually is with these small travel tripods is that they are small. Obviously, they are easily affected by wind than big sturdy tripods, but because they are so small, they are easy to carry with me out into the field, and I don't have to carry around on a big sturdy tripod. This one here, I haven't had any problems with it. I have photographed in the Faroe Islands, in Iceland, in storms, and yeah, it really is no problem whatsoever. Alright, so since that last part, which I recorded a little bit more than a week ago, I've had like an eye condition, which is the reason why I haven't been able to continue working on this video. You can probably see it still a little bit, but I am back in action, and it's time to talk about the camera. So I'm still using the Sony a7R III. I haven't updated it to the Mark IV, and I haven't really found much of a reason to do so. I think the 42.2 megapixels that are in this camera is, at least for now, completely sufficient. I'm super happy about the photos I get from it. So I have like 2.5 issues with it, and the first issue is also the biggest issue, and that is definitely that the camera suffers a lot in moist conditions, or I think it's because the hot shoe gets wet. If there's some droplets that getting into it, the camera thinks that I'm trying to apply an accessory to it, which doesn't belong to the camera, or the camera doesn't recognize. So it pops up with a warning, and you have to press the camera, press a button to have that warning go away. But then it pops up just straight after, which is super annoying because you then have to like keep pressing that button to get it away, while you also have to change settings and so forth, which you can't do whenever the error message is up. So that is just super frustrating, especially if you need to work fast and you're in an ice cave or something like that with a lot of tourists around, and you have to be very specific when you take the photos. So the next problem, which is also a pretty big issue with this camera, and that's simply just because it's mirrorless, that you get quite a lot of dust on the sensor, and you have to do way more sensor cleaning than you will have to do with a regular DSLR. Now the half issue is simply that this camera still don't obviously have a fully articulating screen. I would really prefer to have a screen that I could fold out, turn around, and I could use it when I have the camera in vertical position and so forth, because as you know, I do quite a lot of vertical photos. But right now the flip function kind of only works as long as I'm shooting horizontal. So these were the negatives about the camera, but I have so many positive things to say about it. Like, it has a fantastic dynamic range. Like with this camera, I can usually get away with a maximum 2 photos, bracketed photos. I don't need to use 5 brackets. I haven't needed to do that at any point. I can usually use 2. In very severe conditions, I maybe need 3 with 2 stops in between, and that's just down to the dynamic range just being so powerful. This is also an ISO invariant camera, which means I can lift the shadows quite a lot without introducing a lot more noise in the shadow areas, contrary to my older cameras from Canon, the 5DS and the 5D Mark III. It is of course also a monster when it comes to low light performance. The A7 III and the A7S II are still better in regard to noise handling at the higher ISOs, but considered this is a 42.2 megapixel camera, this one is doing excellent. I can film the northern lights live without having like a lot of noise in there. There's still some noise in there, but generally it is some pretty decent results when the northern lights are fairly strong. Of course, another reason is there's a built-in intervalometer, and that's something they have updated the A7R III and also the other Sony cameras with back in April. And I'm using that intervalometer quite a lot when I need to photograph myself from a big distance. Just put it on the intervalometer and then I just walk out into the field and have the camera take photos from a distance for me. So in that way I actually don't need to use a remote control. So the one I talked about in one of my summer videos that Nick Page used last year, I don't really need it. So in that way, like it's a hardware thing I don't need to carry around. So the built-in intervalometer is like the best improvement Sony have made on the A7R III since I bought it. Another good thing about this camera is the 4K video capabilities. Sadly, they don't have 4K 60 frames a second, but 4K 30 frames a second is what I can pull out of this camera. And this makes this camera really good for the work I do. I would have wished a faster frame rate, but I can do without. So generally for this camera, and the reason why I stick with this camera is that it is such a fantastic all-round broad purpose camera that I can use to both take my photos with, my high-end photos, and I can use it for vlogging and filming and whatever I need in really dark conditions also, because it's so good at handling the high ISOs. Another good thing for you if you decide to buy this camera is that it is of course much cheaper than when it was released a couple of years ago. I think it's about a third of the price that they have cut off since they have released the Mark IV version. And speaking of price and buying, I have of course affiliate links to all my gear down in the description, both from B&H and from Amazon. I'm pretty sure most of the links are up to date. And how they work is that if you buy whatever through one of those links, I get a small commission through that. It doesn't cost extra for you, but I just get a little bit of the total sale either via B&H or Amazon. So if you will buy something, I would highly appreciate that you use my links or any other landscape photographers on YouTube links. It is how we make our money. Alright, so the last thing I want to talk about is my new backpack. So this is the Shimoda X50, Action X50, and I have used this throughout the autumn, both on my tour to Norway and on my November tour in Iceland. And what can I say? I finally have a backpack that can contain almost all my gear, and that includes all my photography gear, but also all my vlogging gear, including the drone. And this of course comes with the caveat that it becomes very heavy, especially also when I put my night photography lenses into the backpack. Very heavy. So that is of course the flip side of having a big backpack, and it's actually something that from a practical point of view you need to take into consideration if you go out and do landscape or travel landscape photography. But let's look at the backpack itself. Of course there's the belly belt, which is pretty good belly belt. I don't have any complaints about it, and I guess that's the entire point of using a backpack. What I experienced this summer for the first time is that I was taking photos in a hot area, so I was actually walking around with all my camera gear in my backpack and only had a t-shirt on, and my old backpack were a little bit too heavy. I haven't tested that out with this backpack, if the shoulder straps and the belly belt is better, but hopefully it's something I will be able to test in the upcoming year. But yeah, belly belt fine, straps good. You can change where you put the straps, so you can make them adjust to your size. Another thing I found to be super handy are these very big pockets on the front straps here. And I can, yeah, they are designed to put either water bottles into it or your phone, but I found it to be very handy for my vlogging gear. As an example, you can see here my Zoom H1. I can just put it in here, and well, when I'm out vlogging, I have it by my hand. And I can put my DJI Osmo Pocket in the other. And then I basically have everything I need for vlogging. Super, super handy. Another thing about the Shimoda backpacks is that they come with this box that you actually put inside the backpack. I have the big DSLR version, and I should probably have chosen the mirrorless version because it's a little bit smaller, not as tall, and I do have some problems with this because I kind of don't really feel that it fits in there. It's a little bit too tall, and I sometimes have problems when I'm closing the backpack down here in the corner, that yeah, it doesn't, it takes a little bit more force than I would like it to do. So really think about if you think the big inlet is what you actually need, or if you can go with the one that is a little bit smaller. You can of course design how the inlet looks with yeah, just like many camera backpacks. You just pull it apart and make the pockets in the size and in the design you actually want and need. So nothing new there. Another thing I really like about this backpack is that it has two handles, one on the side here and the regular one here on top. And that is good when you have like a lot of gear in it and becomes very, very heavy. That yeah, you can grab it in two different ways, and it's always good to have that option, especially if you travel a lot and you're in an airplane and you need to put the backpack up in those overseat compartments, and if you're in nature and you just need to grab it and put it on yourself. So all in all, really good solution, brilliantly thinking there. And on that note, when it comes to flying, this one does fit in most like Boeing 737 and also smaller machines. I have experienced one place where I didn't manage to fit it in. So it is just on the edge. But in most modern airplanes, you can bring this as hand luggage and bring it inside the cabin of the airplane. There is of course also a front pocket here, or back pocket, or however you perceive your front and back of the backpack. Super spacious, you can put a lot of stuff into it. Inside of it there are smaller pockets. I use this for my batteries and other accessories and so forth, and even pockets inside of that pocket. So yeah, very well designed, lots of stuff. It of course also comes with a lot of extra straps, so you can easily strap on either your tripod to the back or to the sides. Personally, I prefer to just put it here on the side and sling out one of these pouches here, which are by standard put here in the sides. You can also open it from the side and grab your camera, but you can't do that if you're using that inlet that I am using. So yeah, well, it depends on how you design your own backpack, and it takes a little bit of time deciding on that. Personally, I didn't use it on my old backpack, so I don't really need it here or use it here either. And that is because I am using this one here, the Peak Design capture clip. So when I have my camera out I basically just put it on this one here whenever I walk in nature. This is by far my favorite accessory I have, beside of course my tripod. And last but not least, we have this extra room here on top. Very spacious. You can basically just fold it out and you can see how much more space you can actually put in here. I use this for jackets I need to bring out into nature, and food, and whatever else makes sense to bring out into nature. Even extra camera gear if I need that. And you simply just roll it in like this and lug it like that. And there is an extra zipper, so you can actually get in there without having to unroll it each time, which is again super handy. It is also very rugged, and it's basically waterproof. The material it's made of is fantastic. As you can see, it's a bit dirty. I've been using it, and it's extra solid here on the bottom. So if you put it in some water and something like that, it won't get wet on the inside. All in all, a fantastic backpack, and it comes recommended. You definitely need to be aware what kind of inlet you buy for it. Personally, if I could choose the mirrorless large inlet to it, I would have chosen that. But besides that, I'm very happy about it. I don't always use this backpack. If I don't need to bring as much gear, I use one of my older backpacks, smaller backpacks, simply because they're easier to handle. But all in all, this is like my standard backpack, the one I use on travels and also if I go out into nature here in Denmark. So this video is becoming a little bit longer than I planned it to be, but it takes time to go through all your photography gear. So this is, my photography gear going into 2020. I also, of course, have some vlogging gear I specifically use for that, and a voice recorder and so forth. But I might put that in another video if you're interested in watching that. If you are planning to buy any of the photography gear I showed in this video, I would highly appreciate if you would use any of the affiliate links down in the description. Besides that, I hope you enjoyed the video and it wasn't too long, because talking about gear is not my favorite topic, but people keep asking, and well, once a year I think it's okay. So thanks a lot for watching, and see you in the next video.